On the 12th day of the escalation in the Middle East, the conflict is widening beyond the battlefield and it looks nothing like last June's 12-day war. Strikes between Iran, the United States, and a Zionist entity continue, while tensions spread across the Gulf, raising fears for global shipping, energy supplies, and financial markets. As oil prices surge and diplomatic pressure mounts, the question tonight is whether this war is heading toward further escalation or whether a path to de-escalation still exists. As the military confrontation between Iran on one side and the United States and the Zionist occupation on the other enters its second week, it has become clear that the war has not unfolded according to plan, having expanded to include several countries in the region amid expectations of its protracted nature. Usama Ayadeh's report.
From a swift military operation resolved by airstrikes, as the Zionist occupation authorities imagined, to a war with no predictable end date, even with a multitude of official statements and declarations. With the first American-Israeli attack that killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Tehran seemed to absorb the shock, responding directly to its leader with missiles and drones targeting the heart of the Zionist entity and American military bases in the region.
The result of the aggression by Israelis and Americans, which has made the whole region insecure, unstable, and the consequences are huge for not only us, but for the whole region and now for the international community.
The Iranian war enters its second week amid expectations that it will turn into an open-ended war of attrition for all parties after its scope expanded. A war in which Tehran is betting on its resilience after announcing the use of an advanced missile arsenal that it claims carries warheads weighing 2 tons, and even vowing that it will be the one to decide when this war ends.
This is the second time this has happened, and in the middle of negotiations, literally. The negotiations are being bombed. Therefore, any mediation that takes place will naturally be under conditions where first there is not only a ceasefire but a complete agreement, meaning reaching a point where we know it will not happen again.
Iran has so far categorically refused to engage in mediation efforts to establish a ceasefire in the current confrontation, asserting that it will only accept tangible guarantees. Iran has taken a stance described by observers as decisive, declaring that it will not enter into any negotiations with the United States, even if it means prolonging the war.
After 3 rounds of negotiation, and after the American team in the negotiation, said itself that we made a big progress, still they decided to attack us. So I don't think, talking with Americans anymore would be, on our agenda anymore.
Not a swift victory as the Zionist entity hoped, but a war whose end cannot be predicted. The realities on the ground reveal that this war is entirely different from the 12-day war, its most prominent feature being the refusal to surrender, even if it requires enduring the consequences of its prolongation.
And so the war has now entered its second week with continued strikes and rising casualties. And to talk more about this, we're having with us Mr. Abdelrahmi Bissaha. He's an international advisor in macroeconomic strategy. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. via a video conference. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we also have with us Mark Mlowo, geopolitical and corporate risk management expert, joining us from Geneva. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Maybe we start with you, Mr. Mark. So from what we know today, how would you describe this, the current phase of this conflict? Is it a controlled military campaign or the early stages of a wider regional war, as we're hearing everywhere?
Well, first and foremost, there is, I think, one very important observation to be made. And quite simply, any military action is never anything other than a means to an end. And generally, said end is a political end. What does this mean? It means that a military action should support a political objective. And right at this moment in time, unfortunately, the United States of America has still to communicate exactly what this political objective actually is. So we are going through a phase of enormous confusion whereby we have three of the most powerful and important individuals in the world, the President of the United States, the Secretary, basically, the United States Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Secretary for Defense, or as he prefers to call himself, the Secretary of War, all of whom give quite contradictory objectives. They give quite contradictory explanations as to what the plan is. And not only do they give contradictory explanations, they also manage to contradict themselves. So we are in a scenario whereby Israel's objectives are very, very clear. There's no doubt there. There's nothing to be discussed in terms of what does Israel want. The big question is, what does America want? And I don't believe that I'm the only person in the world that has serious doubts as to the fact that currently the United States of America does not actually know what it wants, what its end game is, what its final objective actually is. All of this creates a scenario whereby the markets lack any form of stability. There's great confusion. We have the potential for this conflict to expand quite radically. We have a scenario where it's absolutely impossible to formulate any hypothesis as to how long this scenario will last. We know that as far as Israel is concerned, the longer it lasts, the better. We know that the United States of America, in reality, would like to declare a win, a victory. Exactly what win we're talking about or what victory we're talking about is up to somebody else to decide. So it's not in the American interest for this scenario to be a prolonged scenario. I think as far as Iran is concerned, ironically, the longer it lasts, the better. Iran is actually in a position whereby potentially it could actually benefit from a much longer conflict, and it is actually in a condition whereby it can continue to target, in particular, American assets in the Gulf region, but also non-American assets in the Gulf region. And this is the most worrying aspect because it does absolutely create a scenario whereby sooner or later, a number of the Gulf states are going to lose their patience. So far, all of the Gulf states have been very, very, very calm, and they have not reacted in a manner in which they would actually be capable of reacting. But quite how long this can continue, we really don't know at all. Mm-hmm. So the possibility for this conflict to continue for quite some time is absolutely there. It's on the table. There are those who would benefit from this and those who would not benefit from this.
Mr.
But
Mark,
it's a scenario that's mixed up.
Yes, the scenario doesn't look very clear. Donald Trump just today on Wednesday spoke to Axios in a phone interview and said and repeated that there are no significant targets left to target in Tehran, and that the war, he claimed that it will end soon. What does this say so far? I mean, he's saying this, and then you've got the Iranian Masoud Pezeshkian saying that there could be probably talks and conditions to end the war.
Well, quite what talks and quite what conditions there are to end the war, I really don't know. And I'm very, very skeptical to be honest with you. Let's take one thing into consideration. There are the midterm elections in the United States. Mm-hmm. And before the midterm elections, Mr. Trump has to declare some form of success, some form of victory. And he's very, very good at inventing things. So I'm sure he's quite capable of managing to arrive at a point whereby he can declare that the conflict is over, the victory is there, etc., etc. But I think that's rather far-fetched in terms of it being very, very difficult to imagine that would be truthful. We have a scenario whereby Iran is not going to simply give up or surrender or turn itself around and decide that it is going to agree with whatever terms the United States of America would want from them. In terms of negotiations, the United States of America no longer has any credibility whatsoever, because let us not forget that there were negotiations that were interrupted. The Omanis, who were absolutely fundamental to organizing and coordinating these negotiations, were very, very upset, to say the least, because they firmly believed that the possibility to continue these negotiations were actually there. But these negotiations were interrupted, and Iran was bombarded from the air by both Israelis and Americans. So when you decide to drop bombs on a country while you're negotiating with them, I'm afraid your credibility is no longer there at all. So it will be very, very difficult for Iran to take any proposal to negotiate any form of solution seriously. It's just not going to happen. And what we do have is a serious risk of this conflict going on for a very, very long time yet.
Okay, so from the information available today, Mr. Mark, what does the situation on the ground inside Iran actually look like in terms of military operations and the impact on civilian infrastructure? We heard from them that more than 1,300 people died, many injured. What's the assessment so far in Iran?
Well, I'm not in Iran, so I can only rely on media reports such as your own. I can only rely on what I hear from people that are in contact with people in Iran. And to be very, very blunt, it's not easy to fall asleep at night in Tehran in particular, as well as a number of other Iranian cities. It's a situation whereby military operations continue, devastation continues. The situation is I'm not going to use the phrase catastrophic, but not far from catastrophic. And the great concern is that this continues. Now, without a shadow of doubt, the combined Israeli and American forces will have hit a huge number of different targets. They will have completely destroyed Iran's air capabilities, and they will presumably by now, according to declarations made in particular by the United States, have destroyed a great part of Iran's naval capabilities, but not those capabilities that are useful to blocking access to the Gulf of Hormuz, for example. So the smaller vessels, the faster, the more dynamic vessels that are useful for maintaining the Strait of Hormuz closed are still there. They can still be used. Iran, without a shadow of doubt, still has quite a considerable capacity in terms of missiles and in terms of drones. And here there's another observation. Becomes at a certain point a war of attrition, in the sense that Iran presumably still possesses a huge number of drones in particular that can be sent in waves over the Gulf towards American assets, American bases, American interests in the various Gulf nations. To avoid these damaging assets or damaging civilian infrastructure, you have to take them out of the air as they are in flight. And whereas these drones are relatively economic to produce, the hardware that's necessary to intercept them and to destroy them is extremely expensive, and it's also very, very difficult to produce in huge numbers, which is absolutely
We'll talk more about the cost of the war on on both sides. Maybe let's get back to Mr. Bissaha Abdelrahmi. So tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are escalating with reports of naval operations targeting vessels suspected of laying mines. How serious is the risk to global shipping and maritime security if this very specific situation continues in the region, in the Gulf of Hormuz very specifically?
I mean, it's easy to start a war. It's very difficult to end it. And this is a typical case where it seems to me that this war was declared without any strategic purpose and also without knowing what is the strategy of the other part. I mean, Iran. Iran has decided to expand the conflict to the regional and the neighboring countries, and decided also to block the Strait of Hormuz, which is extremely damaging to the energy supply. So here you have a systemic geopolitical shock with immediate energy consequences, disruption. You know, you look at the Middle East is a hub in terms of energy and trade, especially the Strait of Hormuz. And the problem of this conflict is it's laden with uncertainty. We don't know what the United States want, but we know now that Iran wants to have a protracted, because it's involving the neighbors, and the supply of energy are totally disrupted. You saw that the price of the spot went from last week 66 to 114 before coming down to $100 and to 91 today, on the basis of a statement from President Trump that he's going to protect the Strait of Hormuz, and then also the G7 tapping oil reserves, and also the sale of oil out of a tanker belonging to Saudi Arabia off the coast of Taiwan. However, all these measures are extremely short-term measures. So the conflict is here. The impact on the global energy supply is here. The next phase, if the conflict doesn't end, will be to weaken the economic activity, which was already weak in the world economy, and maybe could translate into a recession. So here we are in terms of total uncertainty, with damages inflicted to the oil, and damages also that could be inflicted to the economy. The region that are mostly affected are, of course, Asia and India, China, and so on. So here we have, this is where we stand today. Nobody knows exactly what's going on the next phase. And it seems to me that President Trump is trying now to extract himself from this conflict. Because just to let you know, this morning I went to fill my gas tank. Last week I was paying $2.75 a gallon, and this morning it was $3.35, so it's an 18% increase. And remember, Biden was beaten because President Trump used the prices of oil as one step, stepping stone to conquest the presidency.
It was a leverage. The G7, you spoke about the G7. They have discussed escorting ships to ensure the freedom of navigation in the Gulf. How could that be realistically feasible?
That's the problem. We don't know how they could escort when you have a conflict zone. This is a war zone now. This is a total war zone. There are talks about escorting the ships. There are talks about the U.S. offering a $20 billion fund for reinsurance about the vessel. But the problem is not just the governments involved in the conflict, it's the shipping. The shipping lines, they are not going to take any kind of risk. So for the time being, we seem to be in a deadlock situation. The Strait of Hormuz seems to be completely closed. And if it remains closed for more time, over the next few days, the economic harm to the world economy will be extremely high. already today, we are missing 10 million barrels a day. We are missing $5 million, 5 million barrels of refined petroleum product, and we are missing 20% of LNG supply. So it's a serious economic problem that could really inflict damage to the world economy. And nobody knows exactly, we have no visibility as to where we are heading over the next week. Are we heading to a ceasefire? Are we heading to an end of the conflict? It seems that from what the leadership in Iran is saying, they are opting for some kind of protracted conflict.
Back to you, Mr. Mark. Iranian strikes have reportedly damaged at least 17 U.S. sites across the Middle East. How significant is this for the U.S. and for the region?
Oh, that's a very, very good question, because it is extremely significant for the region. Let's take a step backwards. Most of the Gulf states, at a certain point, decided that they would create very strong defense alliances with the United States of America, and therefore they allowed the United States of America to open bases on the territories. They entered into contracts with the United States of America, whereby America would supply their defense requirements, be they fighter jets, be they missile systems, be they anti-missile systems, be they whatever they may be. A number of the Gulf states basically got the vast majority of the defense capabilities from the United States of America. Now, let's not forget that on the Arab Street, basically, the populations of these various Gulf states were not at all happy about the USA presence on their territories. But that was, by the Gulf leaders, always explained by the fact that we need the Americans to defend ourselves. Now, what's happened over the past 12 days or so is that it's well demonstrated that the United States of America has not defended Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, etc., because Iran is managing to strike these countries. So a lot of the leaders are now in a rather embarrassing position, whereby this concept of we accept Americans on our territory because they're going to defend us is no longer tenable, in the sense that America has demonstrated that it's not capable of defending these nations. So that's going to be one problem for the Gulf nations. We also, and if I can just go back to what your previous guest mentioned, some very, very important points. Now, the Gulf, it's not a door. You don't close the door and the Gulf is closed.
Yes.
But when you have, as Iran does, the capability to use very fast vessels to attack very, very large container ships or oil transport vessels, etc., you have effectively closed the straits. And also, when there is such a risk, the insurance companies basically say, I'm terribly sorry, I can no longer insure you, and therefore you have closed the straits. Nobody that's transporting $100 million worth of oil is going to pass through the Straits of Hormuz without insurance. Now, yes, there were talks of an American emergency fund to insure, etc., but I'm sitting here in Geneva, which is one of the principal ports in the Mediterranean, and a very, very important shipping town. I can assure you that there is nobody that's saying, well, that's okay, we'll get insurance from the USA. That is simply not happening at all. We are losing access to not only petrol, but also gas, and that's another huge problem. And let me just, before closing, remind the viewers that oil is not simply that which is used to produce fuels for our trucks, our lorries, our cars, and our motorbikes. Oil is also a basic component in a lot of pharmaceutical products. It's also a component in a lot of products that are manufactured. So the impact is not simply, what we see immediately, the price at the gas station. And, also I've noticed an increase in prices just like your other guest, and it is alarming indeed. But it's also the financial impact on those manufacturers that rely on products that are derived from oil, basically. So the domino effect is of great concern indeed.
Interesting. Mr. Mark, Hezbollah and Iran, they have said that they carried out their first coordinated attack against Israel. That was a couple of hours before we're speaking right now. How important is this in terms of expanding the scope of this conflict beyond Iran?
Well, Iran is not Iraq in the sense that Iraq never had any international capability whatsoever, whereas Iran, through a number of proxies, we know very, very, very well, has international capability. And the two proxies that we know best of all are obviously the Houthi movement and Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been, well, it hasn't been decimated, it has been severely wounded over the past couple of years, but it is still a force to be reckoned with. And Hezbollah is not going to lay down its arms. Hezbollah will, without a shadow of doubt, fight until the very, very end. Hezbollah is an incredibly well structured and managed organization. It's very, very disciplined, it's very, very efficient, and it still has the capability to strike Israel. It still has the capability to conduct a series of exercises, far less than it had 2 years ago, but it still has these capabilities. And unfortunately, there's very little that the Lebanese government, the Lebanese state can do to disarm Hezbollah. So the Lebanese state is suffering tremendously. The Lebanese citizens are once again, and I repeat, once again, this is a story that has been going on for decades by now, are once again suffering because the Israeli policy in terms of Hezbollah is quite simply that of massive bombardments. Nevertheless, Hezbollah in some fashion manages to maintain a certain strike and response capability. And its relationship with Iran has been damaged for the simple reason that a lot of the interfaces, a lot of the management structure is no longer with us. They're dead, basically. However, there is still quite a formidable capability to act on Iran's behalf. So I'm quite certain that we will continue to see Hezbollah actions against Israel in particular. But Hezbollah also has a rather extensive international network that will certainly not be in the position to fire missiles or similar, but would be in the position to conduct acts of sabotage or very, very focused attacks on individuals or structures abroad in countries as diverse as Argentina and Thailand. So that's another consideration that we should not ignore at all. Hezbollah still maintains an international capability, so it is one of the long arms of Iran, basically.
Mr. Mark, the U.S. congressional sources reported that the war may be costing the U.S. around $1 billion per day. There were also reports saying that some estimates said that it's about $2 billion daily. How sustainable is this level of spending if the conflict actually continues, as many expect, for a couple of weeks or maybe more than that?
Well, the answer is basically that it's not sustainable. However, the United States of America will find a means of paying for the costs of these operations. But I think when we reason in terms of sustainability, we don't only have to look at the financial aspect. We also have to look at the industrial capacities and the industrial capabilities that allow the United States of America to supply its allies with defensive capabilities. Put quite bluntly, let me use an example that everybody's familiar with. The Patriot missile systems. They cost a lot of money, yes. And when you have a swarm of 10, 100, 300 drones coming in, you lose a lot of that missile capability, which has to be replaced. Now, I don't know how many Patriot missiles can be produced every week, but I'm quite certain that the production levels are far, far less than the current level of use of missile defense systems. So there will actually come a point whereby the United States of America is simply not capable of producing enough replacements for the missile defense elements that are being used to counter the threat from Iran. So there's that consideration as well. Then as regards the purely financial aspect, well, unfortunately, perhaps healthcare and perhaps public education always suffers from budget cuts, but miraculously, when we're talking about military operations, the money always seems to appear from somewhere.
Mr. Bissaha, beyond the military cost that we just spoke about with Mr. Mark, what broader economic impact could this have for the US and also for the global economy?
First of all, let me step back on the issue of the financing of the war. I don't think it's an issue because, look, the US issues the international reserve money in the form of the dollar, so they can get the fund. The problem is mostly political cost of this conflict. This conflict is already inflicting a lot of damages on the consumers. As I said before, the price at the pump have increased by 18% over 7 days. That's extremely sensible in terms of politics. As mentioned by the other colleague, there are midterms elections which are going either to shut off the presidency of Trump, make a big difference. And at this stage, he's losing it. He's losing it because he was elected on the promise of bringing down the inflation and bringing down the prices of oil. The price of oil has ripple effect through the economy. The first effect is inflation. Inflation numbers are a little bit higher. They also affect the scarcity of the oil and the natural gas is going to affect transportation, is going to affect a lot of industries, logistics, and the chemical industry. So it has ripple effect that could cause a recession to the United States. So the financing of the war is not a big issue. The political cost of this war, by the way, which is disapproved by 65% of the Americans. So I'll just tell you, and support is not going to be very much there for Trump to continue a war. The problem for Mr. Trump is how do you extract yourself from this conflict when you have an opponent who is there for the protracted war, who is shutting down the energy hub of the world, who is inflicting damage to Asia, to Europe, not maybe to the United States, except in the form of slowing down of the economy, more inflation, and political cost in terms of the election. So that's the big issue. When we look at the prices, however, if you look at the spot prices, they are about today $91. However, if you look at the forward prices, they are still within the reasonable range. I see, for example, the delivery for May 2026 is $73, for June is $72, and for 12 months is $57.60. So this shows that a lot of economic, actors are betting on maybe a shorter war than expected. Problem is how to put pressure on the Trump administration, who is looking badly for a way out now.
So the Trump administration, as you said, is looking for a way out. We just received a statement from Trump. He is saying that the necessity of quickly winning the war is there, adding that the US can hit vital Iranian infrastructure, but refuses to do so for reconstruction reasons. He said earlier, as we just talked about, that the war with Iran is ending soon, and they finished with all of the targets in Tehran. Mr. Mark, what do you think about those statements from the American president today?
Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. What does the war is ending actually mean? The war on what? Let me go back to the concept of military actions are a means to an end, which presupposes the concept that there is a clear idea as to what the end actually is. So, put bluntly, you use military actions to achieve a political goal, but this political goal changes from day to day, or perhaps there is no political goal. We've heard regime change on numerous occasions. Fine. Let's say that the end game, the objective is regime change, but you do not achieve regime change by bombarding a nation. That's not the way it works. The big problem right just now is, and again, let me be very, very blunt. We're dealing with the president of the world's most powerful nation, an individual with a very, very, let me be diplomatic, very, very complex psychological profile. And the result of this is that on many, many occasions, he passes for being an individual that does not actually understand his responsibilities. And amongst his responsibilities, there is that of giving assurances, there is that of clarity, there is that of stating objectives, there is that of explaining to first and foremost, to the Americans, what the United States of America is doing, why it is involved in a conflict, what it wishes to achieve through these military actions, and in particular explain to the mothers and the fathers of the American service people who put their lives on the line, and very often, as we've already seen, lose their lives. So, for nothing else, in respect for them, you do need to be very, very precise in explaining why you have decided to get involved in a similar operation. And, again, let's be very, very blunt. This is possibly the worst mistake that any American president has made since George W. Bush decided that it was a good idea to invade Iraq. But if nothing else, George Bush took almost 6 months to explain the rationale, to explain the reasons, and then these reasons resulted as being absolutely fictitious. They were absolutely false, but at least there was the discussion with the United Nations Security Council. Congress was involved, the foreign partners were involved, etc. A coalition was formed, etc., etc. What is happening in Iran seems to be nothing other than an ego trip on the part of somebody that suddenly realized that they could actually do something. They could have they had the possibility to conduct very, very aggressive, very, very violent actions against a nation that has been at loggerheads with the United States of America since 1979, basically, open, close a parenthesis. And I'll link this to a comment made by Donald Trump just a few days ago when he was complaining about lack of support from the British government. The British government's lack of support was very simple to explain. It was concerns over legitimacy of this conflict in Iran. And there are still many doubts as to whether it is legal or otherwise. And Mr. Trump complained that the British Prime Minister was not Churchill. Now, complaining that Keith Starmer is not Churchill actually demonstrates how little you know about history, because I was actually very, very pleased when Donald Trump said that Starmer is not Churchill, because we do have to remember that Churchill is actually one of the individuals that's responsible for the current situation in Iran. Churchill was perhaps the brain behind the 1953 coup that removed the democratically elected Iranian leader, Mossadegh, to replace him with the Shah. The Shah's regime was what brought about the 1979 revolution, and the 1979 revolution gave us what we had today. So thankfully, Keith Starmer is not Churchill. And this brings us back to the concept of you cannot do things without reasoning in terms of the long-term consequences. You cannot get involved in a conflict. You can't simply bomb a nation. You have to think in terms of what you're doing, what your ambitions are, what your goals are, and what the consequences will be. We're very sorry to be repetitive, but there appears to be no political plan whatsoever. So Donald Trump tomorrow morning can do whatever he likes. He can say whatever he likes. It's all nonsense.
Understood.
The problem is not resolved.
Message understood. Mr. Basaha, back to the oil markets, back to energy security, because it's the talk in these days. Iranian officials, they warned that oil prices could reach $200 per barrel if Gulf exports are disrupted. How realistic is this scenario? How realistic is $200 per barrel, and what conditions would need to occur for prices to reach that level?
I mean, at this stage, everything is possible, of course, because for the time being, the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Some Gulf countries are aiming at shutting down operation because there is no kind of storage where they put the oil. So it could happen, and it could happen, of course, as far as the spot price is concerned. However, I wouldn't focus so much on the spot price. I would focus on the term price, the forward price. The forward price for the time being, surprisingly, is remaining within the same range as it was before the war started on March 1st. Having said that, already this kind of disruption of the supply of energy is hurting the economy, because even if there is a ceasefire today or if there is an end to the war, it's going to take months before restoring the normality of the global supply of energy. So the damage is there. Let's see how it works. And as I said when we started, this is a conflict that is really laden with total uncertainty, total insecurity, because we have on one side one party, the United States, who has no strategic goal stated as far as this conflict is concerned. At the same time, the Iranians have gotten the Gulf country involved in the conflict, and also putting to a halt the hub of energy of the world. So let's see what's happening. One point that needs to be emphasized: Trump has not thought about this war, and he's badly trying to extract himself. So this is why you hear the statement, the war could end soon. We have achieved our result. The problem is, to what extent the Iranians are willing to discuss this. Let's not forget that a lot of damage was also inflicted to Iran in terms of destruction of infrastructure, destruction of refineries, some oil reserves, the human cost, etc. So let's see what's happening over the next few days.
Mr. Basaha, the Wall Street Journal, they reported, citing U.S. officials speaking to them, the U.S. informed Israel of its dissatisfaction with the recent attacks on Iran's energy facility. They're asking, Washington warned Israel not to repeat the strikes on Iranian energy sites without its approval. What does it mean?
It means that the energy is so sensitive. If you destroy some kind of infrastructure, energy infrastructure of Iran, the cost will be borne today, tomorrow, and over the next few days. Global supply of energy will take time to come back to normal. It will take at least 3 to 6 months to get back to normal if we have a ceasefire very soon. So the more destruction are affecting the oil-producing countries, the oil reserve, the oil stockage, will going to be felt by the world economy, which, by the way, was extremely weak before the start of the war. And this is the biggest energy supply disruption that the world has seen at a time when the world economy, as I said, is extremely weak.
So we've seen energy infrastructure, it's already under pressure, with incidents reported near major facilities such as the Ruwais refinery complex, the Fujairah oil terminal, one of the biggest in the region. What can we say about this?
Well, this is I can understand that the Iranians are targeting the oil supply in order to inflict as much damage to the U.S. economy. But at the same time, any damage that is inflicted to the oil industry is going to have a lasting effect. And the economy being fragile, we will see more and more repercussions on the economy. As I said, first of all, it will be inflation. Then it will be, you will have an impact on the exchange rate, you will have an impact on the stability of the financial sector, and then you have ripple effects all over the world. And the economy, which was already fragile, is going to be more wounded, and that's the risk. For the time being, we are on a collision course to maybe a recession in the world. Especially, but at the same time, you have some regions that are showing their fragility in terms of oil dependency. You have Asia, you have the Middle East, you have Europe.
Speaking about oil dependency, we have seen countries, including Japan, that they're planning releases from oil stock piles already, starting with private reserves, while Donald Trump is saying the International Energy Agency coordinated release will substantially reduce the prices. So they're already acting to reduce the prices and to stabilize the prices.
Let's not bank on that. It's a short-term effect because the strategic reserves or any kind of opening of the pipeline from Saudi Arabia are going just to maybe mitigate the loss of energy that we have today. Today we are losing 10 million barrels per day in terms of oil. We are losing 20% of global LNG supply. The release of some strategic reserve, the sales the sales of oil out of the Saudi ship off the coast of Taiwan, or the new pipeline are not going to solve the problem. The problem is we have to come back to a ceasefire and peace and return to normalcy in the Middle East. Otherwise, the cost will be staggering. Anyway, the cost is there already, okay? The damage is done.
The damage is done. Mr. Mark, back to you. We've seen Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian telling Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif that Tehran has no intention of entering conflict with regional countries. Iran also says a truce depends on US and Israel pledging no future strikes. Do these statements signal perhaps a genuine opening for diplomacy, or are they part of just wartime messaging?
Well, there are statements that are necessary. During times of conflict, many things are said. Some of the things that are said are necessary. Some of the things that are said are not necessary. But you do have the responsibility to give reassurances. You do have the responsibility of clarity and transparency, after which what you've actually said may or may not prove to be true, but very often statements quite simply have to be made. Going back to the concept of, yes, of course, Iran has every wish that some form of agreement emerges whereby there is a guarantee that neither Israel nor the United States of America will ever attack them again. But that is quite simply wishful thinking. At best, it's wishful thinking. But as I said, in times of conflict, many things are said. Very often are said simply because in that precise moment in time, there seems to be an obligation for said statements to actually be made. But I can just close very quickly on this concept of statements and reassurances.
Yes.
And going back to what the colleague, incidentally, I agree entirely with absolutely everything that he said. These are very good, these are very important points. But in this complete and absolute lack of clarity, albeit that the markets in general are very resilient and they bounce back, etc. And yes, of course, there's great risk of recession, etc., etc. So it is particularly important for clarity to emerge from the principal stakeholders, the principal actors in this scenario. And quite simply, we're not getting clear, reliable, nor even coherent messages. And this is one of the biggest problems.
In times of war. Mr. Mark, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff may travel to the Zionist entity for talks. What does this visit indicate about Washington's role in shaping the next phase of the conflict?
I think it's Israel that we're going to shape the conflict. I think it's Israel that has already shaped the conflict. I think that Netanyahu has been very, very able in. I don't think that he can actually believe his luck. He has a president of the United States of America that will back him in absolutely any decision that he makes. So my fear is that more than the United States of America, Israel will shape the future. And I think, if nothing else, at least as far as Israel is concerned, the objectives are very, very clear. We can agree with it, we can disagree with it, that's irrelevant. But if nothing else, at least they are following their own contorted or otherwise logic. They have their own rationale. So it's actually quite easy to understand what Israel wants and how Israel will act and how Israel will continue to act. The same cannot be said as regards the choices made in Washington. But at the end of the day, my fear is that rather than the United States of America shaping the future of this conflict, it will be Israel.
It will be Israel. In your saying, Spain, we have seen it today. They have reportedly withdrawn their ambassador from Israel, leaving only the chargé d'affaires in there. What message is Madrid trying to send with this move, and could it influence the other European governments?
Well, the message is very clear. You withdraw your ambassador as an extreme form of protest. So that's very, very easy to explain. Spain has already been very, very clear with the United States of America in terms of its not offering support. It's being in complete disagreement with American policy in this moment in time. But when you withdraw an ambassador, that is probably the most extreme form of protest that a country actually has. As regards will this influence other European nations? Probably not. Probably not. I don't see that. I see a series of mixed messages in Europe. I also see a number of European nations that disagree with what is happening at the moment, but at the same time do not want to be overly clear in their disapproval. I think that the concept of we need in any case to remain close to the United States of America is a determining factor in the position of a number of European governments. In reality, it's perfectly understandable. Again, we might agree or we might disagree with this policy, with this stance, but it, unfortunately, is understandable. Europe, in terms of defense, needs the United States of America. It's as simple as that. There is no such thing as European defense sovereignty. We keep telling ourselves that, yes, we're capable of defending ourselves, and in Europe I include the United Kingdom. But the reality is a little bit different. We do, in very large measure, still depend on the United States of America for our own protection. So there's a limit to how much we can upset the United States of America, and we have to take into consideration that we are dealing with an administration that is not the most rational or stable administration that we have seen.
Back to you, Mr. Bistaha. Speaking about the European Union, speaking about Europe, they warned that the conflict could push inflation above 3% and reduce 2026 growth from 1.4%. to 1.0 or lower if oil and gas prices remain elevated. So how vulnerable are the European countries and global economies to a prolonged energy shock like we're seeing now?
First of all, let me make a point about geopolitical strategy. The strategy of Iran, we haven't discussed much about it, is by attacking the neighbors. Iran is pushing all the Gulf countries into the arms and of the United States, and who will look for closer U.S. security protection. And tomorrow also, Iran risks being completely isolated. Now, going back to the economic picture, inflation is the first effect of a rise in oil. Oil is a key commodity which is driving growth, which is also powering all kinds of sectors, from agriculture to services to industry and so on. So inflation is going to be higher, at least over the next few weeks. You see it already in the prices of gasoline, the retail gasoline. You see it in Europe, you see it in the United States, and you will see it in all other importing countries. So I don't know how much of an increase that will impact inflation, but we could say between 0.5 to 1 percentage point will be a reasonable impact. At the same time, you will see an impact on economic activity and growth. You will see an impact on exports also for a lot of countries. And the region that come out as very, very weak in terms and fragile is Europe and Asia. Europe already has shown its vulnerability after the Ukraine war. Europe doesn't have energy. So it's quite an important problem for Europe and for Asia. Asia gets supply from the Middle East. China, India, they buy energy from the Middle East. China has started diversifying its sources, but still, when you have a region that exports 30% of the oil in the world, an armed conflict from this one is extremely damaging to the world economy. Of course, the effect of this war will be different from one region to another. They will wound less the United States, which has full independence in terms of energy and is also far from the war theater. It's going to affect more Europe. It's affecting already Asia. Again, as I said before, for the time being, it is true that the spot price, the price for immediate delivery, is skyrocketing because there is a premium representing the geostrategic risk. But the forward prices have not budged much. It means a lot of people are believing that this conflict will be short-lived, because I don't think it's also in the interest of Iran, because Iran is being totally destroyed today in terms of human cost, in terms of infrastructure. It will take them a lot of time to do that. And then isolation. For the US also, the US is trying to extract itself. This war is very much unpopular in terms of, first of all, it was not backed by the population, and the economic effects are starting to ripple through the economy.
Maybe quickly before wrapping up, Mr. Mark, considering everything, considering the military, maritime, economic developments, everything on the ground, what are the most likely scenarios for how this conflict could evolve in the next coming weeks? Are we seeing further escalation, containment, or probably a diplomatic breakthrough?
That's very, very difficult that's a very difficult question to answer for one very, very simple reason. Generally, in scenario planning, you have 2 or 3, maximum 4 different scenarios. Making more than 4 scenarios is a waste of time. But in scenario planning, you always have the advantage of being able to understand a logic or a certain form of coherence or a certain form of rationale.
But there is none.
In this conflict, we have 3 principal actors. only one of the three actors follows a certain logic and a certain rationale, and that is Israel. The United States of America does not, and neither does Iran. So it's very, very difficult to make any form of provision or forecast.
Thank you very
It's
much.
very difficult. But I can just close on this. Unfortunately, the risk of escalation, the risk of this getting far worse, is absolutely there.
The risk of escalation is absolutely there. Thank you very much, Mr. Makloua. You joined us live from Genova.
Thank you very much, and thank you to your viewers as well, and also my colleague.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Bissaha, for joining us. You also joined us via video conference live from Washington, D.C. And
Goodbye.
Goodbye also to our dear viewers. Thanks for your kind attention, and see you in our next edition.